In this video, we're going to be looking at 3 ways you can grow peas. That's the veg crop peas, the ones that you eat, not the sweet peas, which you don't eat, but you can obviously use as a cut flour. Now, actually, they are very similar. So if you are someone who watches my videos for my flowers, then you will know how I grow my sweet peas, and honestly it's pretty much the same as growing the garden peas that you're going to eat. There's not really any difference, to be honest. But in this video, as I said, I'm going to look at the 3 ways you can grow peas. And the first way we're going to talk about is growing them direct in the ground. The second way is if you're too cold still, we'll look at growing them in the greenhouse. And if you haven't got a greenhouse, we'll cover the winter sowing method as well. Basically a kind of indoorish environment. And then the third method we're going to look at is growing them as a microgreen. And a microgreen, technically you can actually grow that all year round, because you're not actually going to grow the plant to its full maturity. You're just going to use the sort of sprouting greens as a garnish or as an addition to your salads. So the first thing you want to do before you even start sowing your peas in any way, shape or form is to decide which peas you're going to grow. There are kind of 3 types of peas that you can choose from. You can choose the snap peas, and they're the sweet ones with the crunchy pod where you can eat the whole pea and the pod. But then there's the snow peas, and they have thin flat pods that are great for stir fries. And then you have the shelling peas, the garden peas, which is the variety that I'm growing. And with these ones, you only eat the actual pea and not the pod itself. And they are absolutely jam-packed full of vitamins, obviously, as are they all actually. But these particular shelling peas you can freeze as well. If you harvest them very quickly and freeze them, they will retain all their good nutrients and vitamins. So they're fantastic. And also, of course, you can harvest the peas for sowing again the following year. For the purposes of this video, I've chosen a pea called Early Onward, which I can sow now for an early crop. So that leaves me the option to then sow again, say for instance at the beginning of March or mid-March, which will give me a later harvest when this crop is finished. I'm also sowing them over my Jerusalem artichoke, which I did in my last video, because they are going to mature much later. So I want to make full use of this container with another crop first. Now I'm going to sow mostly of my peas outside in a raised bed, but you can sow them in exactly the same way in the ground. Just remember to amend the soil. If you have a clay soil, you need to add some grit or something to loosen it up and provide drainage. And if you have a very sandy soil, obviously you're going to need to add some fertile sort of organic matter to help retain moisture. Now don't worry if you haven't got any raised beds or containers, you can just use cardboard boxes. That's what I did last year. That basically, as the garden starts to grow throughout the spring, those containers just disappear anyway behind all the greenery. Whatever container you choose anyway, you just need to make sure it's about 8 to 20 inches deep, as they have a long root. Now, the peas do like wet conditions. So if you live in a dry climate, you're going to have to come up with a watering schedule. You don't want basically the soil to dry out around the pea. You want it to always be moist, but not a bog. You don't want the peas sitting in a puddle. At this stage, you don't need to worry about a teepee. You can give yourself some time to think about that after you've planted them out, except just make sure that wherever you plant them, you're going to have space to put some kind of trellis or teepee that they can grow up as they begin to mature. And I'll link my 2 videos on my teepee and my cheap trellis in the description below if you want to watch those to get some ideas. You need to bury them about 5 centimeters deep, because they need to be into the darkness and they need to get plenty of rain and moisture so that they'll pre-sprout some roots before they start sending their shoots up out of the soil. Now I'm going to be covering mine with a cloche, which is basically another budget version. Is going to be a cheap upturned water bottle that I've cut the bottom off, and that is simply because mine will just get eaten by slugs. We've had such a cool, wet summer last year and winter this year that the slugs have just been having a field day in my garden despite my army of birds. So I'm going to be covering mine with a cloche, and that is a great solution for you too. I'm also going to be putting a layer of sand on top of the compost just to create a sort of hostile environment for slugs. You can also use like crushed shells. People have suggested wool, etc. But I'm going to use a bit of sand and then an upturned cloche just to create a kind of obstacle course and a hostile environment for those slugs. Don't expect to see shoots for a good couple of weeks. You need to give the pea time to sort of acclimatise to the wet soil and to loosen up, grow some roots, and then the shoots will come. All right, the second way you can sow your sweet peas, and this is mainly for people who still have some very hard frosts to get through before their spring arrives. And that is to grow in the greenhouse. And of course, actually you just grow them exactly the same soil treatment, etc. But you will need a better watering schedule, obviously, in the greenhouse because it will have no access to rain. So you're going to have to think about probably watering. You said what you want to do is keep the compost that they're in moist but not wet, the same as it would be outside. To make sure those peas don't dry out and to make sure the water keeps them nice and cool so that they know it's a sort of, spring, if you like. And if you don't have a greenhouse, of course, you can start them in the winter sowing method. Just bear in mind that they don't necessarily like being transplanted when they're ready to go outside. What usually happens is they just stop growing. They kind of need to find their feet in their new home. So they won't grow or move for a couple of weeks and you'll wonder if they're dying. But in actual fact, they're just trying to work out what's going on. But they will eventually pick up. So don't worry too much if you have to do the winter sowing method. The winter sowing method, for those of you who don't know, is basically just creating your own greenhouse with a milk bottle, water bottle, or some sort of plastic salad tub or something like that. And I'll link a video on that below as well. Now, to make it even more versatile, your options, to give you even more options, you can grow them as a microgreen. Now, this would be perfect for people who don't have a lot of space, who maybe have to grow everything indoors or on a balcony or something, or a small courtyard area. Microgreens are fantastic for that. Now, you can start these as microgreens outside if you want, or in the greenhouse, because now the conditions are perfect for them. But the great thing about microgreens is that you can in fact grow them all year round. If you have grow lights and a heat mat, you wouldn't need a heat mat actually if you're starting them in the summer, for instance. But you just need to kind of create the fake environment for the peas, but indoors. Well, unless you're growing them in spring, of course, then you can do them outdoors, as I've just explained. The peas indoors, well, first of all, you're not trying to get them to be a mature plant. If you're going to grow them as microgreens, you're literally growing them as an addition to a salad or as a garnish or something like that, because obviously they have the really nice flavour of pea, but you're not going to get them to grow to have pea pods or actual peas. So you're just using them as a micro green. That's the whole point. And the way you grow them as microgreens is different than if you want to cultivate the whole plant to maturity, because you're only looking to get 1 to 2 inches. Some people harvest at, but you can do 2 to 3 inches to make a nice addition to your salad or to use as a garnish. And of course, because you're not trying to raise a whole plant to harvest, then you can grow these all year round. And obviously, depending on the time of year, that will depend where you grow them. So if you're growing them in winter, you'll need to grow them indoors under grow lights. And I have a video on the cheapest grow lights that money can buy, and I'll link that below, and how I rig it up. And of course, in the summer, you can grow them outside anyway in a container. And sort of around now, if you wanted, you could do them in the greenhouse, even just for microgreen purposes. So they're ideal for people who don't have a garden or much of an outside space, because it means you can still harvest your own greens and salads, and you can juice them as well if you're on a health kick. And if you want to go even cleaner, if you're growing them indoors, for instance, if that's your only option, then you can grow grow them hydroponically as well, which I think I may consider at some point in the future, but I haven't got. You kind of need containers with a mesh bottom so the roots can go through that into the water below, and it has a kind of a matching container below with which you can fill with water, and then the roots grow into that. I wouldn't mind doing that actually, but for now I just grow mine in soil in these containers here. Ideally cover the whole surface, and then you don't bury them like you would normally when you're growing the peas to a full plant. You just allow them to stay moist on the damp surface. You would need to mist them to keep that surface moist and to soften the shells. You can also pre-soak the shells, the peas, if you want to speed up the process, but I never really bother. I just keep the soil moist. And then you cover them over for 2 to 3 days, maybe longer if you didn't soak them, until you start to get some sprouts and some growth. Then you can take the cover off and you can just leave them to grow. And depending on whether you pre-soaked and obviously the various conditions, it can take anywhere between sort of 10 days to 2 weeks to get yourself something that's harvestable, that you can add to salads or garnish or juice. Anyway, so if you found that video helpful and if you found these ideas really useful, inspiring, please don't forget to subscribe, like and click the notification bell, and I'll see you again in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.